In a small village nestled deep in the African plains, there lived a woman named Adaora. She was known throughout the village for her strength and unyielding spirit. Her words were sharp, her pride fierce. To her daughter, Grace, Adaora was more than just a mother, she was a symbol of power, someone to be respected and feared. Grace observed her mother closely, learning the ways of pride and the refusal to forgive. But Adaora's pride was built on grudges that ran deep. One of the strongest was her bitter enmity with Sarah, a former friend and now her neighbor. What began as a small misunderstanding had grown into a wall of resentment that neither woman would break down. Grace saw how her mother clung to anger as if it were a treasure, and she learned that to forgive was to show weakness. One day, Grace and Sarah's daughter found themselves in the forest, playing as they often did. But a simple disagreement quickly turned into a heated quarrel. What should have been a fleeting argument became something more, something darker. Grace, remembering her mother's teachings, refused to back down. Her friend pleaded for peace, but Grace's heart had already begun to harden, just as her mother's had long ago. That evening, Grace returned home. The weight of the day's events hung heavy on her, but she tried to push those feelings aside. Adaora, seeing the strength in her daughter's defiance, praised her. "You are strong, Grace. Never let anyone think they can cross you," Adaora said with pride in her voice. But as Grace sat in the dim light of their home, a seed of doubt began to take root. Was this truly strength, or was something precious being lost? Days passed, and the village grew colder. The warmth of friendships was replaced by whispers and distance. Grace found herself alone in the village square, watching as the villagers avoided her gaze. Her friend, once so close, was now a stranger. The world that once felt full of life now seemed empty. Grace began to realize that the path her mother had shown her was leading her to a place of loneliness and regret. One night, Grace walked to the riverbank, the moon casting a soft glow on the water. She stood there, the weight of her choices pressing down on her heart. The strength her mother had taught her now felt like a burden, a barrier that kept her from truly living, from truly loving. But it was too late. Grace had followed in her mother's footsteps and found herself trapped by the very lessons she had once admired. And so, the story ends, not with joy, but with a heavy realization. Like mother, like daughter, Grace had inherited more than just her mother's pride. She had inherited her loneliness, her bitterness. Some lessons, once learned, are hard to unlearn. And the weight of those lessons can be a burden too heavy for even the strongest heart to bear. The moral of the story, like mother, like daughter, is that holding on to grudges and refusing to forgive can lead to isolation, bitterness, and loneliness. The story illustrates how negative traits and behaviors, when passed down from one generation to the next, can trap individuals in a cycle of unhappiness. It teaches that true strength lies not in holding on to anger but in the ability to forgive and let go, breaking the cycle of resentment and living a more fulfilled life.